Well, good evening. Uh, there are, I believe, all the other regulars are out for tonight, so it's just going to be us, I believe. Um, we'll know if we get started and they come. But okay, we'll go ahead and go to prayer. Before we get there, Danny, can you open us in prayer, and then we'll put the prayer on the thing?
They say sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. And right now I'm losing bad. Stood on this stage night after night, reminding the broken it'll be alright. But right now, oh right now I just can't. It's easy to sing when there's nothing to bring me down. But what will I say when I'm held to the flame like I am right now? I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. They say it only takes a little faith to move a mountain. Well, good thing a little faith is all I have right now. God, when you choose to leave mountains unmovable, oh, give me the strength to be able to sing. It is well with my soul. I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. I know the sorrow and I know the hurt would all go away if you just say the word. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. You've been faithful, you've been good all of my days. Jesus, I will cling to you, come what may, 'cause I know you're able, I know you care. I know you're able, and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. I know the sorrow.
Okay. So, don't forget that if you have any questions, we have the question box, the white box there on the back table there. So if you have any questions about God or the Bible, anything like that, make sure to put it in there. And all the questions, don't forget, are anonymous. So that takes us to today. We will be continuing in Revelation. Last week we closed up looking at the sixth trumpet. That finished up chapter 9. And remember that after the sixth of each, the seal and the trumpet, there is an interlude. So we got through the 6 seals, and then there was an interlude. Then the 7th seal, and it took us straight to the trumpets. Then we went 6 trumpets, and now we're in that second interlude before we get to the 7th trumpet. But that break does not happen in the bowls. There is no break between the 6th and 7th bowl. So today, we will continue by looking at the second interlude, which consists of 2 visions. The first one is the vision of the little scroll, and the second vision is the vision of the 2 witnesses. Also do not forget that the interludes are not always chronological. In fact, usually they are not. So as we're going through, Revelation was not written in a way where it's, starts at the beginning and then ends at the end. Although it does start at the beginning and end at the end. It also has a lot of back and forth stuff that it does. When we get to the dragon, for instance, in chapter 12, that's going to go before the birth of Christ, and then it's going to hop afterwards. It's going to kind of hop around a bit. So we will start by reading Revelation chapter 10, which consists of 11 verses. Do we have a volunteer as tribute?
Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head, and his face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. He had a little scroll open in his hand, and he set his right foot on the sea, and his left foot on the land, and called out with a loud voice, like a lion roaring. When he called out, the 7 thunders sounded. And when the 7 thunders had sounded, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down." And the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay, but that in the days of the trumpet call to be sounded by the 7th angel, the mystery of God would be revealed, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, "Go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land." So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, "Take and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey." And I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And I was told, "You must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings."
So let's start in verse 1. And the beginning of this chapter is going to have a little more attention than the end. That's just how it's going to work. First up, it introduces the character of an angel. This angel is probably not Jesus. If you read enough stuff about Revelation, somebody somewhere is going to suggest that this is Jesus. There's really no reason to assume that this is Jesus. It seems to be just an angel. It's actually debatable whether Jesus is ever portrayed as an angel in the entire Bible. I've already given you both sides of that argument last year, and I don't really feel like rehashing it. But the main idea that I want you to get from this is that the angel is not Jesus. And the second thing is, when it comes to the angel's appearance, we really shouldn't rush into trying to find an allegory. It is a simile, not an allegory. And you might say, okay, what's the difference? I'm glad you asked. Maybe you didn't, but I want to clarify here. I'm not assuming anybody here is stupid. I just want to clarify this so that we understand how to correctly interpret Scripture. So first off, what is a metaphor? A metaphor is basically two unrelated things that are directly compared. So like, for instance, her voice is silk. He is a giant. These are metaphors. Obviously, he's not really a giant. He's just tall. You're saying he is something. Okay. Now, a simile is similar to a metaphor, except it's instead of it being that thing, it's like that thing. So, for instance, he was like a grasshopper. Well, how was he like a grasshopper? That's a simile. So here in this part where it says, then I saw another angel, his face was like the sun. This is a simile. It's a type of helping us understand that it was really bright, that it was radiant. So when you're reading through scriptures, you can look for signs of metaphors and similes, and it will kind of be obvious when you find them because it will be things that oftentimes are impossible. Isaiah is a great example of this. He says that the trees, I believe it's Isaiah 55 or something, it says the trees will clap their hands. Well, trees don't really have hands. And we know that. So, when we're reading that, we can understand that this is a metaphor. It's saying that the trees will clap their hands. Okay, all right. That's not literally, they're not literally going to sprout hands. But how terrifying would that be? If they did sprout hands and clap them, that would be a little scary. Now compare that metaphor and simile to what an allegory is. And this is important because a lot of times when people read Revelation, they try to say that everything in Revelation is an allegory. They also do the same thing with the book of Leviticus. So it's Leviticus is hard to understand, maybe a little bit boring, so I'm going to make the things stand for other things so that it's funner to listen to because I like Chronicles of Narnia more than I like Leviticus. And that's just not the right way to look at this. So allegories are not like metaphors or similes. An allegory is basically a story where elements represent a deeper meaning. So for those of you who maybe like reading, a good example of this is in the book Animal Farm by George Orwell, which was actually about the Russian Revolution and the rise of Stalinism. Now, that is a good example of how that is. It's a story that has a deeper meaning to it. Okay, so Revelation is not an allegory as a whole. It might have parts in it that are allegory, but it as a whole is not allegory. It is apocalyptic literature. There's a complete difference. When we read in Revelation and it mentions John, John is really John. John isn't a symbol for something else. He's not, an image of some deeper meaning where we have to decode it. John is actually literally John. He got this actual vision, and he is writing about this thing that happened. It's not an allegory. What about symbolism? Symbolism is close to allegory, but not really, because allegory is more like a narrative. It's like a story, but symbolism is more of a specific thing that represents an idea. So a good example of that was actually found last week in Revelation, where it says that the horses had lion heads. This is symbolism. They are standing. Those things, the horses with lion heads, are representative of divine judgment. Once again, if you try to force it past that, you kind of get into all kinds of weird, applications, which takes us to what's called an improper symbolism, and that's where I'll give you the example of it before, because I can't really explain of a better way to define it. You look at the Bible, Revelation, for instance, and you say that this ancient thing represents this modern thing, but in mystical terms. So, the horse with the lion head, that would obviously be a tank. What? See what I mean? You take something that's an ancient thing and you apply it to some modern thing, but with these mystical terms. And that really doesn't make sense why John would reword things that he saw in a confusing way that would specifically apply to 2026. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense because he was writing to a series of churches in Asia Minor, so that wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. And so what happens is people end up mixing up the context with the literature and with the points of the text and all that, and they walk away without having been encouraged by the book of Revelation or having any kind of growth spiritually or new insight into the mind of the Lord. So when it says here, the angel's face is like the sun, it is a simile, not an allegory. It's not something we need to decode for a deeper meaning. His main point is simply that the angel had a radiant appearance. And I wanted to write all that down on that sheet that I gave you so that way when you're doing your own Bible studies, you can remember these things because each different book is written in different styles or genres. For instance, Psalms is written more poetically. Isaiah actually has a bunch of stuff that, even though it's prophecy, is written as poetry, and you have to interpret it likewise. For instance, people get to the book of Genesis and they're trying to read it as if it was a science textbook written in 2026. That's just foolishness. That's just foolishness. It is the Word of God that is trying to teach us things that have to do with our eternal life. In these words are life. It's not interested in scientific pursuits. That's what science is for. Go crazy. It's trying to teach us something deeper than that. And that takes us to verse 2, which says, "And he held a little scroll open in his hand. He put his right foot on the sea, his left on the land." So there's two things we need to hit on this. The first thing with the little scroll. What is a little scroll? The word is related to the scroll from chapter 5. Now, I don't want you to think that means the scroll is related to that scroll, but there are two main ideas about what this little scroll is. The first idea is that it is a smaller part of the bigger scroll that Jesus already broke the seals on and opened up. I personally don't think that's what it is, but I just want to relay that to you. The second commonly held view is that it is introducing a new stage of the in the book, a new stage of what God is doing, and you see this by the way that it's first off it introduces the little scroll, but then it goes on to say in verse 11, prophesy again, talking about how there was a break there in verse 11. And so that I think this is probably a better way of looking at it. It's a new stage relating to the second vision of the interlude, which is the two witnesses, that it's a way of introducing us to this new stage before we get to the seventh trumpet and things really get to be more severe, more intense, however you want to look. The second thing I want to mention about the verse 2 is the way it mentions the angel's feet, specifically on the land and on the sea. This is just a way of talking about the way that what is happening is universally significant. This is not something that's going to affect a third of the world or a fourth of the world, anything like that. This is something that is meant as we're getting into big things. It has to do with the whole world. There's nobody that should not be listening to this warning. Now, we get to verses 3 through 4, where he talks about, he called out with a voice like a roaring lion, and something happens here that we don't have full understanding of because John is stopped from writing down what they were about to say. And that takes us to the problem of the seven thunders. What is that? There are two main ideas. It is either a who or a what. And that's as far as we know. So it really depends on who you're reading and whatnot. If it is a who, it is possible that the seven thunders are the seven spirits of God. It's possible that it is seven angels. We really don't know. There really is no clarification. This is literally all it says, and this is when it is introduced too. So it's not like we can turn back to a previous section of Revelation. This is how it's introduced. When he cried out, the seven thunders raised their voices. Oh, that's it. There is no other introduction. So if it is a what instead of a who, then it's writing in such a way as to just personify the sound, that there was a loud sound like a thunder, and we're calling it like it's a person. You do the same thing when you talk about your car like it's a she. You're personifying something. Now, I personally think that it probably is a who, but I want to give you both options there. Now, that takes us to the problem of what in the world did they say? Oh, and it's that. It doesn't matter that there's 22 chapters? 22 chapters or so that tell us things. It matters that there's that one part of that one chapter that doesn't tell us something. Maybe it's just my inquisitive mind, but whatever they say is hidden. Now, this bothers a lot of people because, okay, that means we have to read later in the book and it's going to be hidden somewhere later in the book. I don't think so. I think that whatever was said is lost to us. But hold on, doesn't that mean that John heard? Yes, that's exactly what that means. And then John took that secret to his death, and he didn't tell anybody, evidently. But in Deuteronomy 29:29, this is what it says. Very important verse that is oftentimes just kind of blown past. It says, "The hidden things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed things belong to us and our children forever, so we may follow all the words of this law." See, here's a simple truth. We can hear what was revealed in Revelation, learn, or we can focus on the bit that was not told to us, because for whatever reason, God decided it was none of our business. Okay? And that's just the way of it. But I do want to mention that it is very common in this style of writing, this style of literature, for there to be things that are hidden mysteries. You see the same thing happen both in other books of the Bible and out of the Bible, like in other things written by other people. But one other example that's written in the Bible is from the book of Daniel, where he says, don't write this down. But we'll get to that in just a second. That takes us to a series of contrasts that are in this part of Revelation of chapter 10, these sections, verses 5 through 7, and a little bit in verse, well, I guess you could say 4 through 7. That general area there. There's three different contrasts, or actually there's four. I don't know why I only wrote three down. Oh, because I made them into bigger groups. So the first contrast is in Daniel chapter 12, which is what I was just talking about, where it says that the word was sealed and he was not allowed to write down what was revealed because the end was not yet then. It says until the time, right? But here in Revelation we have a contrast to that because he says to seal it because there is no longer going to be a delay. So it's like the exact opposite. He told Daniel to seal it because the time was still a way off, but he told John to seal it because the time was imminent. So, okay, the second contrast appears between the fifth seal and right now, so that's the contrast between Revelation and Revelation point 2. And what happens there is in the fifth seal, the saints are told to wait because they're calling out for vengeance, and God tells them you have to wait a little bit longer. Whereas here, there's no more waiting. We're done with that. We're marching ahead. This is getting more serious. You know, things are much more. Let's do this. The delay is not happening any longer. Although we do need to probably eventually get to the discussion of. What does that mean that the time was delayed? Does that mean that there was one set point from the dawn of creation, or can that point of return be movable? We'll look at that some other time, not tonight. The third little contrast we see here is with Ezekiel. It tells the angel tells John in, I guess that's verse 8. No, he actually tells him to do it in verse 9, to eat the scroll. Now, I know Ezekiel's probably one of the lesser read books of the Old Testament, but there's a part in Ezekiel that really strongly relates to this. It's in chapter 3, and there's a scroll that Ezekiel is told to eat, and it says that when he eats it, it is sweet. But then it says that after this, it doesn't say that it necessarily turned bitter in his stomach, but he said that when the angel took him away at the end of chapter 3, probably like verse 14 maybe, that he left bitter. So it's kind of unclear as to bitter in stomach or bitter in spirit, but there's that idea there that he left bitter. Whereas here, it mentions specifically that he eats the scroll and is sweet, just like with Ezekiel, but instead of him leaving bitter, it turns his stomach bitter. And then the fourth, which is under the heading of the Daniel verse Revelation, is the way that the angel raises his hand. And I remember why I didn't put it as point 4, because it got its own slide. How about that? When the angel raises his hand, this is actually the same thing that happens in the book of Daniel, again in chapter 12. And this is basically a way of making a promise. If memory serves correctly, I want to say this is right. This is common imagery for making a promise, where you would go before the deity and raise your hand. It was like a sign of an oath or a promise, and that's definitely the sense that we see here. That it says here. Let's see, where is it? Probably verse 7. No, 6. He swore by the one who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it. So he's swearing by God and all of creation, basically. There will no longer be a delay. And so this is, again, something that contrasts with the book of Daniel. And in both cases, there's a promise being made. Now, in Daniel, the promise being made is that there is 3.5 years. And in here, the promise is that there is no delay. So that takes us to the next section, which is verses 5 through 7. And not a whole lot I want to point out in this section. It's basically the angel making the promise that the time of delay is over. The time is rapidly approaching. And so there's 3 things I want to mention about this. It's not on your notes, but I just want to throw it out there. The first is that nature oftentimes bears witness throughout Scripture for different things. We see it all throughout Scripture, but one example that we see is when Cain kills Abel. It says that his blood is crying out to God. That's, again, a way that nature calls out. Another example we see is when the Israelites go to the Promised Land, he talks about the way that the land, because of all the injustice of the Canaanites, was calling out to the Lord. It was testifying against them. And then he also says that the land will testify against the Israelites if they should choose to disobey God. So basically the idea I want you to get here is all throughout Scripture, nature bearing witness is a common theme. And the second thing I want to mention, is there a delay or isn't there a delay? Because this angel clearly says there's no longer delay, but then we still have another vision, and then we still have 8 more things of wrath. We have the 7th trumpet, and then 7 bowls. That's 8 things. So, I mean, is it this or is it that? Well, there's a couple ways of looking at this, and you could obviously make the point that, yes, it's not delayed in the fact that the last trumpet and the 7 bowls are happening rapidly together, and it's just really spiraling into a real end times catastrophe. You could make that point, but I think a better way of looking at this is more the way that there's the interludes function as kind of outside the time frame of the end times, and they kind of hop around a lot, and so it's giving more direction to the reader or the listener, or however you want to say that. And it's functioning more as a flash forward. This is, when this angel speaks, bam, it'll be done. Not necessarily that he's going to speak right here, but when he does speak, it'll all be no longer delayed. And then the third thing I want to mention is something I mentioned when we were just starting in the study of Revelation, and that is the way that, so I want to remind you, there were 3 ways I told you that we could understand the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. I'm not going to remind you about the first one, but the other 2 I want to remind you of is either to see them as chronological, that this happens and this happens and this happens, like it's progressing forward, or to see it as kind of like a lens zooming in. And so as you get past the seals and the trumpets, you get to the 7th trumpet, and it's not so much that things are moving forward, it's zooming in closer and closer to the way that the event is happening rapidly. And that takes us to the last section of the book, which is verses 8 through 11. And a few things worth mentioning here. So there's pretty much, nothing real crazy here. A voice tells him to go take the scroll. He goes to the angel, and the angel tells him to eat it. And then it says in verse 10 pretty much exactly the same thing that he says in verse 9. So there's nothing really crazy there. But the thing I want you to get from this is the bittersweet part. In the mouth it was sweet, but in the stomach it was sour or bitter. And that is talking about the good and bad nature of what was being done. There's this kind of bittersweet reality, I guess you could say, to the ministry that's happening and to the work that God is doing. So just to kind of clarify what I mean, the Christians are being persecuted more and more and more and more, and that's bad. So that'd be like bitterness, right? But ultimately, the Christians are going to be saved, so that's sweet. Well, with the same, on the flip side of that, you have the unbelievers who are hearing the gospel, they're being given chance and time. This is great. But then there's the bad side that ultimately they aren't going to believe and they get judged for it. And that's an eternal punishment, and that's not great. So there's a bittersweet nature to what's happening here, to the judgment of God. So whereas although the judgment of God is good, the results that we see are bittersweet. They're good that it's happening, it needed to happen, but the actual carrying out is a lot more difficult. It's like this. It's a lot easier to say this person deserves to die than it is to be the person who personally pulls the plug. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit harder when it actually comes time to it. You can believe something in principle, but then when you actually get to it, it's a little bit more difficult. Well, it's the same thing kind of true here, that this is something that, yes, we want justice. We want things to be set right again. We want that. But when it actually comes down to it, we're seeing Thousands, millions of people suffering and dying for it. So there's a bittersweet nature to it. Now, that takes us to the thing that he tells specifically to John. In verse 11, he says, "They said to me, you must prophesy again." Why in the world does he say this? Well, there's a few things to mention. The first is that prophets both foretell and forthtell, okay? So, because not all of us are walking dictionaries, let me explain what I mean by that. I did not get this, so I had to look up in the dictionary myself, okay? So I'm not calling you guys stupid, I'm calling me stupid. The first one is, that's where you foretell. This is where you say what's going to happen in the future, okay? So in 2 years there's going to be an earthquake, right? Then there's forthtelling. This is where you tell the truth. So when you look at the prophets of the Old Testament, as a great example of this, you don't always see them saying necessarily things that are happening in the future, but things like, for instance, is it Micah or Malachi, actually a little bit of both, where they're talking about different ways that the people are being immoral? Micah 6:8, right, where it says, "I've told you what I require of you, to walk humbly with the Lord, to love justice." Remember this? Well, that's not something that's going to happen in the future. That would be forthtelling, not foretelling. So, when you look at John, his life as a minister, you definitely see him doing both. What he has been doing, but also in the earlier part of this book, you see him doing that, and what he's evidently going to be doing again later in the book. So there's going to be this bittersweet ministry that he has. And, I just want to say this, if any of you guys have been in ministry or plan to be in the ministry in the future, ministry is usually bittersweet. You have, somebody get saved and you feel good about that. You have somebody else that leaves the church in a huff and you get bad about that. I mean, it's just, ministry is bittersweet. So, if you've never done it, I want to encourage you to do it, but keep that in mind. If you have done it and you've gotten hurt, I want to keep you in mind, keep going. So that takes us to the discussion. 2 questions I want to look at, okay? So I didn't know exactly how to word these questions. So I'm going to kind of read the idea that I'm going for here. The actual question on the board says, why does the angel tell John he has to prophesy again? What I'm going for here is, why do you think the angel tells John he must prophesy again when he showed no intent to stop? There's no indication from Revelation chapter 10 that John intends to stop prophesying. So why does the angel tell him to prophesy again? What do you guys think? This isn't like there's a one right answer, okay? They just want to hear what you guys have to think. I'm just going to repeat it for the recording. Pam said because the message wasn't complete as a way to kind of spur him on to keep going. That's what you're getting at, right? Okay. Anybody else? What do you guys think? Any more ideas? So you have John. He hears this thunder, and then he's told to go talk to this angel and get the scroll, and the angel tells him to get the scroll, and then at the end of that, before we get to the vision of the 2 witnesses, the last thing we're told is that he must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Or your translation might read, prophesy against many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Same basic idea. Why? It is a difficult one, I tell you what. if you guys think of something later on, or I'm sorry, were you raising your hand? Okay. If you guys think of something later on, make sure you can either write it down or put it in the question box and I can read it out loud, or you guys can just, let me know that you thought of it. One thing I've been, because I've been really weighing this question, I don't know. One thing that I was thinking about is maybe I'm making it too complicated. And the reason why he says this is because he was told, just when he with the seven thunders, he was told to seal that part up and not say it. So maybe I'm digging too deep, and the reason why he says prophesy again is he's saying, so basically you can go ahead and don't seal up this part with that part. I don't know. I've been weighing this question for all day. I've been weighing this question. I have no idea. So I mean, if you guys think of something, let me know. By no means do I think that I have the answer. So then the next question. What is the significance of the seven thunders words being sealed? Once again, I had a hard time figuring out how to word this. So why do you think the words of the seven thunders were kept secret? What might God have told us about this, or why might God have told us about this in Revelation? Like, why did he mention it? If he was going to keep these words back, why is he even listed in there? What is the significance of this? I don't know how else to say that. What can we learn from it, or why did it happen, or what is the significance of it? And once again, I don't think that there's a single answer on this either. I think this is pretty fair open. Say again? Oh, you're saying could it be referring to the one that the... Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting thought, Mark. Mark's question was, could this be talking about the scroll that with the seven seals that the Lamb opens? I don't know. I don't know. I studied this part for a long time. I never once heard anybody in any of those resources suggest that, and I never thought of it myself. So I don't know. It could possibly be hopping around. That's interesting. What it says is that the one on the throne was looking for someone to give it to open, and only the Lamb was worthy to open it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Father wrote the scroll. That is a conundrum. This is one of those things, I have to sit and think about that for a long time. I don't know. So are there any other ideas, though? I don't want to take up the whole rest of the night with me, staring off at the wall or something. Does anybody else have any ideas? And what's the source on that? I didn't catch it. Oh. I'm dead. Yeah, Google 3:14. That's funny. That's good. That's... Okay. Yeah. Meanwhile, back in Revelation... I'm sorry, that one got me. Man, oh man. So, any other ideas about what the significance is of the of this whole thing, this whole words being sealed away deal? Before I move on, anybody have any ideas before I move on? I don't want to cut anybody off. One thing I was thinking, I don't know, this was just more of a musing than like a real, in-depth Bible study or anything. But it reminds me kind of the humility of not knowing, the humility of not having all the answers. Kind of like one of those things that just kind of reminds us, yeah, the book was given for our edification and to build us up and to warn us about things and whatnot. And it was written to guide the church, but in no way does that mean that we have all the answers. In no way does that mean that we no longer are dependent on God, And I mean, not that reading the book of Revelation wouldn't have gotten you there anyways. I mean, when you're talking about horses with lions' heads, I mean, I think the immediate answer should be, hey, I don't know everything, but I guess to each his own. So the summary of this chapter, though we don't know everything, the end is certain. That pretty much seems to be the main thrust of the main thrust of the chapter. I mean, when you look at the chapters, each chapter thus far has had really a main point. But when you get to chapter 10, it's kind of hard to see the main point when you're first going through. It seems like a bunch of random stuff. But I would argue that the stuff isn't actually that random. It's actually trying to show us about the certainty of the end that's actually coming, that it's going to be bittersweet, and that doesn't mean we have all the answers. So, any questions about anything we looked at tonight? No? Okay. Or don't forget, if you think of a question after, you can put it in the question box. And besides that, we will go next week to the second vision of the second interlude, and that's of the two witnesses. Hopefully, we'll give you some things that you haven't gotten from the Left Behind books, and give you more something that gives you some options there. Keep in prayer about different possible upcoming ministries. We want to make sure that we're, reaching out to people. And sorry, I got something on my mind. I want to make sure that we are reaching out to people, that we are loving on people, that we're making opportunities to share with them about Jesus, and that we're being the hands and feet of Christ. So besides that, can I have Todd close us in prayer, please? Thanks, Todd. Have a great rest of your night.